Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan. So at a recent climate change town hall, Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang was asked some tough questions about greenhouse gas emissions.
Meat consumption, beef in particular, is a major driver of climate change. Should Americans change their eating habits and eat less beef?
All right, so we'll get to Andrew's response to that question in just a second, but little spoiler alert, I was really surprised to see Andrew. He's up on the latest science, citing the United Nations recent study that I've reported about many times on this channel. So we'll check on Andrew's response, and after that, we'll get to Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan didn't like what Andrew said one bit.
You know, the UN just released a study that said we're going to be okay if the vast majority of the world goes vegetarian immediately. You guys see that? So, it's good for the environment, it's good for your health if you eat less meat. Certainly meat is an extraordinarily expensive thing to produce from an environmental sustainability point of view. So I think it would be healthy on both an individual and a societal level for us to move in that direction.
Yeah.
You know, and even that Andrew Yang guy, like talking about getting people to stop eating meat, like that, hey, no.
Yeah,
You know,
come on.
Stop. You can't. He probably believes that that's key to making the world a better place.
Make the world a better place? It's not like he's trying to make people have this fuzzy, warm, happy feeling. He, along with the United Nations, wants to try to avoid the climate catastrophe that they say will inevitably happen unless we drastically change how we produce food and how we eat. In particular, we must eat way less meat.
All right.
I think there's a lot of people that would argue against that. I think if he sat down with those people and had a debate, I don't think he'd do well.
Actually, Andrew's a great debater, and I think he would do fine. But truth be told, this is not Andrew's issue. It's not like he did all this research. It's the United Nations IPCC Climate Change Committee. So why don't you try debating them, Joe?
You know,
Yeah.
I think if someone who could explain the nutrition like really explain, based on like a Chris Kresser guy.
Wait, hold on a second, Joe. I thought we were talking about climate change and making the world better. And now you're talking about nutrition? Like, can you stay focused for a second here? Well, let's go along with Joe here. Let's play his game and talk about nutrition. And he cites Chris Kresser, which is awesome because I've made 3 response videos to Chris's appearance on Joe's podcast when he debated Dr. Khan. And I showed how most of the studies that Chris cited that he believes supported his position, in fact, do not. In fact, often they contradict what Chris is saying. So please watch those videos. I'll link to my playlist down in the show notes. And if we want to talk about nutrition, you think they're not nutritionally adequate, vegan and plant-based diets? Well, again, Joe, how come you think you know more than, say, the American Dietetics Association does, which says vegan and plant-based diets are perfectly healthful and adequate for people in all phases of life?
If you don't kill the cow, tell me what happens. They live forever?
So now Joe goes down one of the most ridiculous anti-vegan arguments as to why we can't stop breeding millions of cows into existence every year so we can kill them for food.
What
Right.
happens?
Then they're
or do
dead,
we get
sitting there.
Let them free and they get taken out by bears and mountain lions in your backyard? So we rise of predators, or we just let them breed everywhere?
Interesting.
And then every time you're trying to drive to the store, a bull comes and smashes into the side of your fucking car because it's got a hard on?
Right.
Because that would happen. Were you going to let them roam free?
Joe, that is just a crazy anti-vegan fantasy. That would never happen. Why are there tens of millions of cows bred into existence every year? It's because the beef industry profits off of it. So why would the beef industry all of a sudden let these tens of millions of animals go? I mean, the only way that could ever happen is if there was some kind of overnight vegan rapture. Everyone just woke up and said, I am vegan now, and there'd be no use for these 70 million cows anymore. And that's not going to happen. That's just a crazy fantasy. Let's talk about reality. What would happen is, as time goes on, remember, this is a profit-driven industry. The beef industry would produce fewer and fewer animals every year to meet the actual demand. And over time, that's how it will happen. Well, there'll never be this unleashing of 30, 40, 50 million cows with hard-ons banging into your cars, Joe.
And if you believe a life is life, just one life is worth a life, well, you're responsible for way more death because you're responsible for birds and bugs and ground nesting birds and rodents and anything that gets chopped, bunnies that get chopped up in those combines.
Yeah.
Farmlands that displace wild animals left and right.
Here, Joe's talking about the massive monocrops of soy and corn grown by giant conglomerate agribusinesses, and he thinks somehow this is a vegan issue, when in reality, well, we've talked about this before. Let me just play a clip where we were responding to Joe about this a couple years ago.
And it was you and I know who these crops are really grown for.
Yes.
You're talking about the corn and the soybean?
Yes. So if you look at actual U.S. domestic corn use, let's check out this graph here. The big blue chunk at the bottom, that goes to feed animals, livestock. And the next biggest chunk is that huge yellow bit. That's for fuel, for ethanol, for cars.
So it looks like less than 5% actually goes to not food, but the food is even food, seed, and industrial uses.
Combined. So
it's like nothing.
Very few.
Drop in the bucket.
Yeah, hardly any corn goes to actually feed humans, let alone vegans. So this argument sucks.
You know, the argument, and it's a real argument, like, why should you be able to kill? Why should you be able to eat something that's an animal? It's a good argument. It's a real argument. And if you really are an ethical person and you look at that argument and that's your point, like we shouldn't be able to kill. I understand you don't want anything to die and you don't want anything to suffer.
Wow, I mean, are you kind of shocked hearing Joe saying this? I mean, these are the words you hear often from vegans, defining the moral beliefs of veganism. But let's see how Joe gets out of this, how he finds a way to justify needlessly killing animals for food.
The way I look at it is the natural world is this in Shark Tank.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All right, so in this natural world fantasy of animals hunting and killing other animals, okay, I get it. That's what happens in nature, but how does that apply to human beings? How does that justify humans needlessly killing animals for food? Oh, and by the way, Joe, remember, some of the biggest, baddest, strongest animals in the wild, such as rhinoceros, elephants, gorillas, giraffes, are plant eaters.
All you're doing, if you're eating meat, if you're eating it in an ethical way, you're removing most of that from the animal's life. And then at the end of the animal's life, you're putting a bolt through its brain. You might think that that's a horrible, terrible thing to do, that cow gets shut off in a second. But if that cow was living in the real world, it would get ripped apart by wolves.
Right.
Oh man, so much wrong here. I've heard this argument time and time again from pro-hunting types like Joe that they're doing the animal a service by killing it, taking its life so that an animal might not take its life. Well, I say, if they belong in nature in this really fierce world, let the animals sort this out. Who are you to intervene and step in and say, I will kill you now and I'm doing you a favor? That's just complete self-serving nonsense. Secondly, cows, as they exist today, don't live out in the natural world. They have been selectively bred by human beings for thousands of years to produce these big, slow, docile beings that we call cows. So this fantasy that Joe has of cows living out in the natural world surrounded by predators, well, that's not what cows are for. There is no natural world for cows because humans have been cultivating cows as domestic animals for food and dairy and other goods and products. So this is just complete nonsense. A cow is not like a caribou or a wildebeest. So given how we heard that pro-vegan moral argument that Joe gave a second ago, if this is his only justification for why he's not vegan, that when animals are killed by humans for food, we're doing them a service, we're making their lives better so they don't have to be in nature and fend for themselves. Well, if that's his sole reason for not being vegan, well, that's just extremely laughable. But remember, Joe was responding to what Andrew Yang said on that climate town hall, and Andrew didn't talk anything about the morality of veganism, the nutritional aspects of veganism, which are all great and fine. Andrew was discussing solely the United Nations report warning humanity that if we don't change how we produce food and eat way less meat immediately, we will not be able to avoid climate change. And this is huge. I mean, this affects every living species on this planet now and the future generations of them. This is something we should take seriously. So anyway, what did you guys think? Leave your questions and comments down below. Let me know if you saw this episode of Joe Rogan. I kind of caught it more recently, so that's why I'm responding to it now. So comment down below, hit like if you enjoyed this video, share it with Joe Rogan people, and until next time, guys, remember, let's try to make a change about climate change. Let's vote vegan. Yes, I'm running for City Council in Long Beach, District 2, on the Humane Party platform. If you live in Long Beach, you can vote for me next year in March. And if you live anywhere in the United States, you can contribute to my campaign. Please, everyone, go check out my website, ryanlum.net.
round and round.